Hi, everyone. I am Amy Vetter, and welcome to the Breaking Beliefs podcast, where anything can be possible, because when you believe you can, you will. This series is all about getting honest with ourselves and noticing the things that we carry with us. We each have our own life experiences to go from, and sometimes it's hard to truly understand what it's like to be someone else. What we can do to create change is to start with us. If each of us took one action each day in our own lives, we could collectively change the world around us. But what does it take? It takes work, it takes practice, and we have to be honest with ourselves as we get there. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I interview Linda Wedul, President and CEO of the Minnesota Society of CPAs since 2016. Linda has worked at the Society for more than 25 years. In her past roles at the MNCPA, she led projects in CPE, memberships, communications, and digital strategies. She graduated from the University of North Dakota, majoring in accounting, and is a certified association executive. She is also a volunteer for Can Do Canines, a nonprofit organization that provides service dogs to individuals with physical disabilities. During this interview, we learn about her background driving a truck on her family's farm to being a musician and eventually becoming an accountant. Linda shares the leadership lessons she has learned to collaborate, listen, and gain support to create progress and move initiatives forward. Thank you so much for listening to this interview, and I look forward to your takeaways that you get after listening to Linda's story. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs. I'm very excited today to be with Linda Wedul. She is the CEO of the Minnesota Society of CPAs. And Linda, do you want to just give us a little background on yourself before we get started?
Sure. So I am actually from North Dakota, and I grew up where we had a family farm. So I spent a lot of time on the family farm learning how to drive a grain truck and how to back it up to an auger to unload that grain. And it was hot sometimes and sweaty. But what you really learn is, at the time, I actually didn't realize I was learning this, but you really do build a solid work ethic doing that. And I saw that from my father and from my family, just in general. There were so many family that was around there. And I went to the school at the University of North Dakota, and I started as a music major. And I was smart enough to figure out that I wasn't going to make money that way. So I switched to accounting, and I got an accounting degree.
We'll have to get into that. Okay, so from the farm side, so were both of your parents working on the farm?
So my dad was both a teacher and a farmer, and those work well together because, of course, you have your summers off. So he also had an accounting degree, and then I had an uncle who also worked in accounting in North Dakota. So I had it around me, which is something that we have learned about accounting and pulling people into the profession, that oftentimes it is somebody close within your influential network, being family, that encourages you to go that route. And then if you're lucky enough to get a teacher who sees that you have the skills and the experience to kind of succeed in it, then you get that encouragement. And that happened when I was in college as well. So I feel very fortunate with the instructors that I had and who I learned from, what I learned from them. So my mother, of course,
was it?
It was a small grain farm for the most part. We didn't have animals. It was mostly all small grains. And hence learning how to drive a truck. I can drive stick shift. We made sure all of our kids learned how to drive a stick shift, and they all prefer, when they can, to drive a stick shift. So we can go to Europe and rent a car, and they are just fine.
Wow. And that's even in the cold weather, like when you picture, so you were in North Dakota growing up. So that's got to be pretty rough in the winter doing that.
Yes, you learn to tolerate the cold, right? And, but you don't realize it when you're there. It's just what you do, and it's all good. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what did your mom do?
My mom was a school secretary, so she also
Oh,
worked in the school system, but as a secretary there. And she was a stay-at-home mom for a while and did some daycare. And then as we got older and didn't need to have someone with us, then she went back to work outside of the home. So but we always
okay.
spent a lot of time at the farm. It was always in the summer. And then, of course, I resented that at the time, probably because we weren't taking the fabulous vacations that all of our friends were taking. We were
Yeah.
working out there.
Um, and then did you had siblings then
I have one
together?
sister, yes, who
Uh-huh.
lives in New Jersey and has a family out there. So we had a pretty small family. But a
Okay.
pretty big extended family with my parents and their siblings, and many of them all stayed and lived close. Unfortunately, that didn't follow for me later. We're all very spread out on both my
Mhm.
husband and my side of the family. But growing up, we were always around cousins and aunts and uncles, and uh, that's something I kind of miss.
Yeah, yeah. So the farm, was it a family farm? Did it he inherit the farm or
They
was it
actually
something your
purchased the
parents
farm
owned?
from his parents and my mom's parents. He bought both of them. And so it's in this little tiny town, 45 miles outside of Grand Forks, North Dakota. And there's a town called Niagara that probably has 200 people in it. So very, very
Oh,
small.
wow.
Yeah. We lived in Grand Forks, so we didn't actually live on the farm because he was teaching there.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
yeah. Mhm.
So why did he do it? What was his interest in it?
He grew up farming, and I think it's that piece of you that connects with growing something and harvesting it and from beginning to end. Farmers really have a challenging career when you think about it. They don't get to set the price of what they're selling. They don't get to control the weather. You don't get to always control if the machinery is working or not. So they're very innovative. They are do-it-yourselfers. They figure it out. And that probably all transfers over when you think about it growing up.
Yeah, yeah. And then did he sell the grain or what was the output from the
Yeah, it would be sold. So it was barley or wheat, beans was another one that was planted. And yeah, then that would be sold. And then he had
so
teach
he did
as
that
a nice,
too?
pardon me?
So he's the one who made the connections for selling all of that too? Or did he have
Yeah, as a farmer, then you would go to the elevator and that's where you would sell it. And whatever the going rate was at the time, or you might store it and wait for prices to go up or down and then choose when to sell it. Um,
okay.
so yeah.
So he had an accounting degree. Did
Yes.
he do accounting? Okay.
He
Okay.
didn't, because what actually happened is he went back to school. So you do really get inspired by your parents. So he was a car mechanic and he wanted to go
Okay.
back to school and increase his opportunities for earning a living. And so he got an accounting degree. So as a family, we lived on a college campus when I was in elementary school. And so you're around college kids and other families that were doing this. And when he graduated, he had an opportunity at a technical college to either work in their accounting department, or he could teach mechanics, truck mechanics, and he opted to teach truck mechanics. And I think he
Oh,
really did like being with the students. Keeps you young, right? When you're with students,
yeah.
and whether it's college or elementary or high school. And so he decided to go that route. And then the teaching, of course, gave him a nice balance with farming and with teaching, because he could take that summer then to
Yeah.
do the work that was on the
Oh,
farm. So
okay.
it was a great balance for years. And he retired eventually from teaching, and now he rents out the farmland. So he's not currently farming anymore.
So what was his desire with accounting? Because you said your uncle's in accounting
And my
too.
aunt,
Was there any
yeah, I think he just saw it as a good career and an
Mhm.
option to go forward. And then other pathways came in front of him, and he got to choose what he wanted to do. So, yeah.
Yeah. So what was when you were growing up watching all of this happening, what did you imagine for yourself?
I think what I learned was that took a step back. So like he's a car mechanic, right? He
Mhm,
was making a good enough living, but he took a step back. He had to give up some of those earnings, knowing that there was something further down the road. So I think it's that delay of gratification
mhm,
that you learn, and it's so important as a child to learn because it's really hard to learn it as an adult. And you've maybe seen it in some people that
yeah,
but that delay of gratification and then knowing there was something better, making that investment to yourself. And I think this continuous learning, and that is something that I would definitely list as one of my strengths would be a learner and wanting to continually learn new things, find new ways to do things, whether it's through reading or through experience. And I think that all came from growing up.
yeah. So, you said you played an instrument. What did you play?
So I played two instruments. I played flute and I played piano. And that and I truly enjoyed music when I was doing it. But when you start to be around real musicians,
Yeah.
it's a very different, you're just in awe. You just know
Yeah.
that you're not at that level. So I had the commitment to practice. So I was probably playing 6 to 8 hours a day in those first 2 years that I was in college, between the performance groups that you were in, just the practicing groups that you were in, and the lessons you were in, because I was in 4 performing groups. And I could get good technically, but you just didn't have that musical talent that people
Mhm.
innately have. And once I saw that, it was like I could enjoy it personally, but it wasn't going to be something that I could support myself or have a career with. So
Yeah.
that was when I switched to accounting. And I think many people have learned that there's a big crossover between music and the use of patterns, and then it
Mhm.
translates into math. And so a lot of it
Yeah.
was the same thing. Yeah. So the accounting courses, and I'm not bragging in this case, but they weren't, I had to study. It wasn't that I didn't have to study, but they made sense to me. They were very logical and I could find the patterns and see how it was all working. And so I really enjoyed my accounting courses.
Yeah. That's awesome. So, I find the same thing because I grew up playing violin and viola, as well, and went into accounting, and I know exactly the feeling that you're saying of just seeing you're still at a high level, but then you see people that it's just natural to them, right? Like, it's not as much work like you're talking about with accounting,
Yes.
and just to make that decision and probably going back to what you said about your dad of just, "I gotta start over. I gotta take another path,"
Mhm.
and really observe of where my strengths are, and I think that's an important thing to see. So I do have to say when I started accounting, it wasn't natural to me, but,
Oh,
I thought it would be more natural. I the debits and credits, I never understood when I first started because it was opposite from a bank account that I've been reconciling my whole life, so I was like, "That doesn't make sense." Um, but
yeah.
until I got into business, like, once I could visualize it, it made more sense to me, but like you, my grandfather was a CPA, he was actually part of
Oh,
the Minnesota CPA Society, um,
oh,
1930s, so, yeah. Funny side note story, I had done some research on my grandfather for some keynotes I was doing, and I actually, this was probably, oh gosh, probably 10 years ago at this point, but I had emailed your help desk and said, "Do you have any information on him? Here's the information I have." And in the same day, someone emailed back every office he was ever in from 1933 to 1977. They were probably excited to have the project, but, um, yeah, it was fascinating, so it was great.
that's awesome.
Information I could have never gotten on my own. Yeah. So,
Mhm.
so what did you do after, you got your degree in accounting?
So we moved down to Minneapolis. So I had married at that point, and this is where the jobs were at. So we came to Minneapolis, and I initially was
Oh,
working
okay.
in jewelry. I was doing jewelry sales because it was. I was already working in that while I was going to school. I could transfer here, had a job, and so I could keep doing that while I was looking for a new job. I was actually a gemologist, so I had a certification to grade
Oh,
diamond. So that goes back to learning and just always
oh, wow.
looking to, what you can do to. So I would be shipped diamonds in these little packages. Like, I still can't believe this actually happened. And I would get them in the mail, and then I would take them out and I would have to grade them and do the little diagrams. And then I'd ship this diamond back. And so it's just, I don't know if they do it the same way anymore. Probably not. There's probably more security around it, because I was just always like, okay, I got this diamond. Let's do this. So I had a gemologist there for a while, and then I went into branch reporting. So I worked at a savings and loan that was doing branch reporting. And that was during the savings and loan crisis that many, maybe the listeners
Mm.
will know or not know about the crisis, but there were all kinds of savings and loans that failed in a period of time in the 80s. And so I was at one of those, or it was in the early 90s, I guess it was. And so we were taken over by the federal government. And so that's where you go through a period of, I don't know what's going to happen. You're nervous, you're scared, you have a family, things are going on. And that was when I landed my job at the Minnesota Society of CPAs. So I've actually been here over 30 years. And I started working in professional
Oh, I didn't know.
education, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And it was such a great match because I had the accounting degree. So I understood the acronyms and the language and debits and credits. I knew what they were. And then
Yeah.
I also had the people experience in working in retail. And I think everyone should work retail or be a server at a restaurant at
Mhm.
least once in their life, so that you
Yeah.
understand what it is like to have those kinds of jobs and how hard they are, and to
Uh-huh.
appreciate when somebody's really good at it. So I was bringing that retail experience I had in working with members and building relationships that way. And then I've always had a love of technology. So when I had been working sales, I had built a database when databases didn't really exist. And we were keeping track of, member or customer names and purchases and how we could reach out to them, those types of things. So I could bring those three things together in education. So I worked in education, it was for 10 or 12 years. And then I was moved into membership, not by choice. I was told you're going to move into the membership department. So again, lots of anxiety because you're like, I am not good at that. That's not something I do. And it's
Right.
amazing what you can grow into when you just have that opportunity, accept it, and say, I'm going to figure this out. And then when you're surrounded by great people that you can learn from, and I've always been blessed with being able to work with amazing people that I look up to. And somebody once told me, always hire people who are better than you, because that is how you will grow and get better. And
Mhm.
I completely agree with that philosophy. I don't want people like me. I want people that are better than me so that I can learn from them.
Yeah.
And then over time, I just worked with many different departments. I started working with digital technologies within the society, communications. And then when the role for CEO and president opened up, I applied for it. And I was fortunately selected by the committee that was tasked with selecting the next president of the MNCPA.
And when was that?
That was 6 years ago.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. And, you know, during this time of leadership, I think this has probably been, I'm part of the board for the Ohio Society. Just probably some of the most challenging, innovative, hardest times as a leader in a society. So, what have you drawn upon in order to help lead Minnesota forward and, the pipeline discussions and all of the different, things that are affecting the profession right now?
Yeah. And there is a lot affecting the profession, and we might view it as either the best time to be in the profession because I see
Yeah.
so many opportunities ahead, or for some people, it's a very scary time in the profession because we don't know exactly what is ahead. And Minnesota did introduce legislation that would change requirements to become a CPA. And that was a significant step. It's not something Minnesota is probably used to. It's not something I am necessarily used to create controversy and start this national conversation. But it really came from the members. And when you have the members talking to you, explaining what the challenges are in the profession and listening to what is going on in their world. When our board came together, this was done with a full board support of going forward. So this is a team effort. It's not just Linda creating controversy out there. It is speaking for the grassroots. And this is where you really see the power of when groups come together. It is the power of associations. It's having a professional home that brings people across business and industry, public accounting, government, education, all coming together, even though they might be competitors out in the workplace, they come together as a profession. And while there's disagreements within the profession, I do truly believe that everybody wants what is best for the profession. We may have differing viewpoints, we might have differing approaches, and it requires communication and trust in order to move forward through that and find the solution that's going to be best for everyone. And I do believe that will happen. I don't know what it looks like yet, but I do believe that will happen.
Yeah. So where did you have to take that again from what you learned of just stepping back and pausing and not moving too fast into a decision of, things that you were doing that might have been uncomfortable, or not natural in the way you've gone about things before?
Mhm. Yeah, it does take courage, right? To put yourself out there knowing that there is going to be people that are critical of the decision that is there. So uh, that builds up over time. And that's such a great question because I'm trying to think of where that has come from. And I do think sometimes when I was put into positions where it was unexpected. So when the savings and loan was shut down and I didn't know what was going to happen there, or I'm put into a new department that I had not planned on and it wasn't something that I had looked for or desired. But when you work through those things and then you see some success from that, you realize that you have whatever is within your core in order to move forward and be successful there. It also sometimes comes from failure. So there are plenty of times where I've had things that did not go the way that I expected. And we should be thankful for our failures, right? Because that is where we sometimes learn the most, is when we move
Right.
through those.
Yeah. So what have you learned from this process and, how are you guys moving forward now?
In terms of the pipeline and
Yeah. So
that,
everything you've proposed and the struggles that you've gone through with that.
we continue to be very engaged in the conversation. So our board chair, very supportive. Our whole
Mhm.
board unanimously voted to move forward. That was very important. Again, it builds trust. We talked through the issue. It also did not happen overnight. It happened over multiple years and multiple conversations of working through it and research. What is the information we need to know and learn so that we're basing the decision on the right things, not just our feelings or our personal experience? Let's build the knowledge around that so that we know why we're making the decision, because that is just as important as what the actual decision is that it has been made. And that continuous support is what keeps us moving forward. The dialogue, the conversation. There's some stat out there, I think, that says like 90% of relationship problems are all based on communication issues. Communication is a constant, it's a constant challenge. Like I don't feel like I ever get good at it. I have to keep practicing it. And it's something that can fade if you don't keep working at it. And so keeping that dialogue, engaging in the conversations, listening, because you can't communicate well if you're not listening. That has to be a part of it as well.
Yeah. So how have you kept yourself from just getting emotional or,
Oh,
and being able to stay within the
yeah.
just stay
Um, yeah, I don't think take it personally, number one. Like this is about the issue, it's not about me. So
right.
that takes practice, I think, too, because I think I was
Mhm.
much more emotional earlier in my
Yeah,
career in reacting to things. And I
right.
used to really think like my work was me. So it was personal. It had, had to be like, no, it really isn't. The
Right,
work part of you really is outside and it isn't personal, and accepting that there are different viewpoints to take a look at. I also don't think there is only one correct answer. There are
right,
multiple ways that we can come to the solution. And so I try not to marry myself to one solution, like it has to be this or nothing. I think there is a range of solutions that are in there. And when we can collaborate, and I very much enjoy collaborative environment, which is why I love the team that I work with. We work as a leadership team. It's not just one person making the decisions. We talk and we explore different ideas, and we're willing to share things that are sometimes difficult to share, but in a very polite and respectful way, because that is how we're all growing. And I think that is how I work through all of that. And the support of both the staff and then the members as well help us continue to move forward in that positive way.
yeah, that's awesome. So, have you noticed so besides being, probably more patient now or not tying yourself too much to your job, have you noticed other things, that you've brought into leadership now just from maturity or maybe from something you saw, earlier in your life that you notice you do now and you're like, well, wow, that was something that I had learned early on and it's helping me now.
Yeah. So there's actually, I thought about this question in advance, and there's actually two books that I feel really influenced me. And one was The Multiplier Effect. So that it was written by Liz Wiseman. I don't know if you have read that book or not, but it's about being a multiplier and not a diminisher.
Yeah.
So how do we multiply the strengths and the wisdom that everybody is bringing to the team? And I would like to hope that every member of the MNCPA and every staff person who has ever been here felt that they became more competent and confident after they were here. And whether they stay
Mhm.
or whether they leave, like that is the goal. Because if we can send out more people that are going to multiply the positive things we have in the world, we're just going to be a better place. I think small organizations are also wonderful organizations to work for because they give you the power to experiment more.
Mhm.
And like individual jobs are more like individual little businesses. How do I grow this job to be more than what it was and when I started in it? And if I can have everybody thinking that way in the organization, just think how powerful you can be and the influence you can have and difference you can make.
Yeah.
Uh, the other one that I really love is the progress principle. That was Teresa Amabile. I'm not sure if I'm saying her name correctly, and Stephen Kramer. And that is, some people are like, we have to make a big change in order to have an impact. And those are sometimes very threatening, right? Because you're making a major change. It throws everybody off of where they were at versus what are the incremental things? It's probably the Kaizen principles, right? What are the incremental things that we keep evaluating and improving? And if every day I feel like I'm making progress, then I feel like I'm
Mhm.
making a difference for the organization or the project or whatever that I might be working on.
Focus on the small wins as you go.
Yeah, right. And then celebrate those, right? Sometimes I feel like
Mhm.
I should celebrate more. But yeah, I always feel like I'm starting over every day, though. Like I have a great day, and tomorrow I start at zero again, and I had
Yeah.
That's that sort of achievement sort of piece of it, but it is important to celebrate.
Yeah. Well, this has been great. And I always like to end the interview with some rapid fire questions. So you get to pick a category,
Okay.
family and friends, money, spiritual, or health.
Let's go with spirit. Hopefully, I get these in the right vein that you're looking for.
Okay. Um, things or actions I don't have that I want to have as far as spirituality.
So I'm actually going to say more art.
Uh-huh.
Having more art, and maybe this goes back to the music, but I think art can be a very spiritual experience and appreciating the value that artists bring. And maybe it's because I don't have those particular skills, and more art in the world, I think, makes the world a better place.
Yes. Things or actions I do have that I want to keep.
So there, I would say, belief that there's more good in the world than there is evil. And so while we can be disappointed and I would like to say we're misled by social media to believe that there's so many things that are worse, then if we just look close to our
Mhm.
neighborhoods, to our families, to the organizations that we support, I think there's a lot more good there than what we might be led to believe.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. And I think people just tend to talk about the negative and not go to what is good or what's happening good, right?
Oh, right. Yes.
Things or actions I don't have that I don't want to have.
I do not have, I don't want to have any overwhelming fear of being hurt or wrong that would hold me back from exploring or learning.
Mm, that's a good one. Uh, and then things or actions that I do have that I don't want.
Like to spend less time on my phone. I have to admit that sometimes I get that scrolling thing going on, or like spending a half hour choosing what to watch on Netflix. Like, what a waste of time when I should be spending it more on hobbies or learning new skills and expanding, me, and how I can be a better person. Because scrolling on my phone does not make me a better person.
Sometimes you just need the release.
Sometimes, yes, that is true.
Just not think for a little bit, right?
Although
um,
yesterday I made my husband look on his phone to see how many hours he had spent on it that day because he's becoming quite addicted to it.
yeah.
And he went to look, it was 5.5 hours of screen
Wow.
time. I'm like, okay, getting
Yeah.
any.
Let's get it down to 5 today, 4.5 the next day. Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. It's a time suck, you know?
It does.
So yes, yeah, and then it's disappeared, so and like you said, there can be time you just need it to release, but other time where it's better spent to be with people around you or even by yourself.
Right. We spend so much time now. Like, this is awesome that we can do this virtually. I love that we can do this.
Yeah.
But I also was speaking to a young professional group at the tax conference last week. And my message to them was that coming in person was so important because that is where you build relationships and professional networks. And that is something no one can ever take away from you. And you can't do that unless you're sitting next to someone, being able to look at them in the eye and talk to them in person. You just don't develop those same kind of relationships virtually.
For sure. Yeah, and you had such a great turnout last
We
week, so it was
did.
great to see.
We really
Yes.
did.
Yeah, it's good to see it in person. So, anything that you want to make sure that people walk away with today that maybe we didn't cover or something you want to emphasize before we close it out?
Sir, I would just want to encourage everyone to remain optimistic. There are so many good things that are happening in spite of the many scary and things that we're seeing happen in the world. And I guess I choose to focus on the glass being half full and I heard someone describe this just recently, and I love the way they said it, is that when you focus on the glass being half full, you're focused on something. That's the something that's in the glass. When you focus on the half empty glass, the empty part is nothing. There's nothing there. So why focus on that? Let's focus on what we have and grow that.
Yeah, love that. That's great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today to share your story and so many great things for our listeners to take away and learn from. So I really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you. And this goes back to like be around people who are better than you because they will bring out the best in you. And I have seen you do that many times. So thank you for what you bring to the profession and to the people that the profession serves.
And thanks for all you do as well.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
All right.
And now for my mindful moments, just looking back on this interview that you just heard with Linda from Minnesota CPA Society. And we talked about her beginnings in North Dakota, growing up on a farm and watching her father, that was a teacher, a farmer, and had an accounting degree, and what she learned by watching him and seeing how he decided to change his career very early on and be courageous enough to step back in life while he went back to school and decide to graduate in accounting, and then eventually transitioned into teaching mechanics in high school so that he could offset the farming side as in the summers with his love of mechanics and being able to educate students as well. All of this really taught Linda a few things that were very important that I think we should just step back and think about. And one of them is this delay of gratification. We live in this world of just instant gratification. We want things right away. And sometimes for things to turn around in our life, we do need to take that beat or that pause so that we can find the path that is going to lead us into something better. And the second part that she learned was just investing in yourself and having that confidence in yourself that there is something better on the other side and to believe in the things that you are doing. So it may not be perfect now, but knowing that the investment that you're making is going to benefit you later and the people around you, as well as continuous learning. And that is something that I think is very important. And sometimes we forget that as we get more expert in our careers and lives, that we might get to this point where we stop making time to learn, to grow ourselves. And I know every time I step out of my business and go to a conference or go to a training, even if it wasn't the best training I've ever been at, there's always one or two things I can take away that starts affecting me and the way that I move forward or work or in the initiatives that I have going forward as well, or even just gives me food for thought to pivot. And I think these things are so important because as you grow in your career, it becomes more lonely. That less and less people are going to give you that feedback voluntarily unless you ask for it. And so seeking out where you can learn is such an important skill to have as you grow in your career. We also talked about just her rise in the Minnesota CPA Society and how she started out in education and moved through other departments as well. And really, when she moved out of education the first time, she wasn't happy to move out of education. It was something that she was asked to do. And so a lot of times we get put in positions that we don't even know what we're going to learn from or how it's going to help us in the future. And sometimes that same beat or pause is just that observation when something feels uncomfortable or we don't really love something as much as we'd like to. But in those times, it's really important that we are taking that time to just learn and not pass judgment yet, because anything that we start new, we're not going to be good at it right away. And that's the uncomfortable part. But it's giving yourself that space to learn and actually observe to see if this could be something that you like or are interested in, or that aligns to you, or that could help you in your future. And then we talked about the society just really working hard on this pipeline issue and doing things that maybe were uncomfortable or not exactly the way they've done things in the past when there has been big initiatives to move forward. And the things that she's learned over this is making sure that this wasn't done out of emotion, that you're building trust, you're doing research, and really having a lot of dialogue and conversation and building relationships to make sure that the outcomes that you are creating are not for you, it is for the better good of all. And I talk about this a lot in my connected leadership talks about moving from ego to service. Is how am I in service to others versus making it about myself, or feeling like I need to be seen a certain way when, the greater good doesn't feel in alignment with that. And it's important that we're open enough to listen and make sure that the things that happen when you do something courageous or hard is that people are going to come out against it. And when they do, is to make sure that you're not taking anything personally, that you are not marrying yourself to any solution, that you're making sure that you're independent, that you're collaborating with others, and it makes the solutions easier, the actions easier because of it. A couple things that we ended with that I thought was really important were the two books that she talked about, Multiplier Effect and The Progress Principle, because you can see in her essence what an optimistic, positive person that she is. And a lot of times our natural way is to move to the negative, or that's just the way our brains are, that we focus on that versus the positive. And we've really got to train our brains to look for the good, and realizing that our energy is contagious. And so when we are negative, it creates negativity around us and it draws everyone down. So when she talked about being a multiplier, not a diminisher, that's all about collaboration. And it's also about being open and positive when you're in these conversations that might be difficult, in order to gain the best result for everyone. So I want to thank you for listening to this interview. There were lots of great takeaways from this discussion with Linda, and I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to share this, subscribe to the podcast, but share it with people that you think it would be helpful for too. And I look forward to bringing you our next guest on Breaking Beliefs. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. I hope you will take a moment to pause before entering back into your day to reflect on this podcast and note 1 to 2 actions you are inspired to do from today's conversation that you could incorporate into your life. To read the full blog and listen back to this episode or any other, you can find them at www.amyvetter.com/Breaking Beliefs podcast and related videos on my YouTube channel. For daily inspiration, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Amy Vetter CPA. I hope that you will choose to like this and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and more, so that you can join us for more inspiration on our next episode.